Over the years, game studios have teased us with jaw-dropping trailers, ambitious promises, and unforgettable concepts, only for those games to vanish into thin air. Some were quietly shelved, others were almost finished before getting scrapped at the last second, and a few, well, they were never meant to be found at all. Today, we're diving into the Canceled Video Games Iceberg. From big-name franchises to weird one-offs, this list goes deeper than you might expect. Let's get right into Tier 1. PT Silent Hills. PT, short for Playable Teaser, was a surprise horror demo released for free on the PlayStation Store on August 12, 2014 during Sony's Gamescom presentation. It appeared under the name 7780 Studios with no clear indication of what it was. After finishing the demo, players were rewarded with a shocking reveal. PT was a teaser for Silent Hills, a brand new entry into the Silent Hill franchise. PT was developed by Kojima Productions in partnership with Konami using the Fox engine, and directed by Hideo Kojima of Metal Gear Solid fame. The game was also in collaboration with filmmaker Guillermo del Toro and starred actor Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead. Why was it so successful? Essentially, the atmosphere. The entire demo takes place in a looping, photorealistic hallway, each loop subtly changing, creating a deep, unsettling sense of dread. The game refused to follow traditional horror mechanics, and it relied on psychological fear, auditory hallucinations, cryptic puzzles, and environmental storytelling. And Lisa, the ghost haunting the hallways, became an instant horror icon due to her unpredictable appearances and terrifying design. All these things led to PT becoming a viral phenomenon, dominating Twitch, YouTube, and Reddit. However, in late 2014, rumors started swirling that tensions were growing between Hideo Kojima and Konami. By March 2015, things unraveled extremely fast. Kojima's name was removed from Metal Gear Solid 5 marketing materials. Del Toro publicly stated Silent Hills was not going to happen, and officially, Konami confirmed in April 2015 that Silent Hills was officially cancelled. Later on April 29, 2015, PT was removed from the PlayStation Store, and players could not re-download it if they had deleted it. This cancellation shocked and outraged the gaming community. While this whole situation happened a decade ago, PT is still a beloved cultural artifact, and fans were devastated to see such a promising project destroyed. 8 Days. 8 Days was a cinematic third-person action game with a buddy cop movie feel and a massive, real-time open world developed by London studios. The core concept revolved around two very different characters, one a rugged ex-con, the other a clean-cut federal agent on a mission across 8 real-time days to take down a criminal syndicate and rescue loved ones. The story spanned across 8 US states, complete with a real-time day-night cycles, meaning if it was daytime in the real world, it would be daytime in the game, as well as high-octane gunfights, car chases, and a dynamic narrative told from both protagonists' perspectives. While many praised the game, many already knew this game was in the world of trouble from the very beginning. At Sony's E3 2006 press conference, 8 Days was shown off with an incredible trailer that blew audiences away with its cinematic quality and hyper-detailed visuals, but it didn't take long for critics and fans to raise an eyebrow. This was because the trailer that was shown at E3 was a pre-render. Sony later admitted that the trailer wasn't an actual gameplay, but a target render, essentially a visual prototype of what they hoped the game would look like on the PS3 cell processor. This created skepticism around the project, and it would haunt the game's reputation for years, leading to its cancellation by Sony in June 2008. Sony claimed the decision was about resource allocation, not a reflection of the game's quality. There were also rumors that 8 Days lacked an online multiplayer mode, and with the growing industry standard of online modes at the time of its release, Sony just didn't see it aligning with their evolving online strategy. Developers later hinted that Sony's internal restructuring and focus on franchises with more market recognition also played a role. While there are no known plans to revive 8 Days, its cult status, cinematic potential, and Sony's current trend of reviving dormant IPs, there is still hope out there for this game to be revisited. The Getaway 3. Another London Studios game, The Getaway 3 was the planned third entry in the Getaway series, which is a gritty, cinematic crime action franchise inspired by British gangster films. The plot was said to involve organized crime, underworld politics, and likely corrupt law enforcement, like most of the other games. There was talk of escalating turf wars and global crime operations, with the player stuck in the middle. While the first two games were known for their London setting, the third game was expanding to both London and Amsterdam, offering a bigger world, more vehicles, and refined gunplay. The game promised highly detailed environments, non-linear storytelling, and next-gen realism unlike anything else on the PS3 at the time. It was very similar to 8 Days in terms of its big ambitiousness. Is that a word? I don't know. Like day-night cycles and wide-open worlds. Also similarly to 8 Days, The Getaway 3 was cancelled in June 2008, with the reasons being the same as 8 Days, like shifting resources and not having an online mode. Despite being nearly 60 to 70% complete, the game was shelved, and London Studios shifted focus to other projects, and there's no telling if Sony will ever release the final project. Agent was envisioned as a stealth action, Cold War era spy thriller, a major departure from Rockstar's crime-focused open world games like of course Grand Theft Auto. The game was set during the late 1970s at the height of the global espionage tensions between the US and Soviet Union. It was developed by Rockstar North and was described as a genre-defining espionage game with globe-trotting missions, political intrigue, assassinations, and spy gadgets. Sort of like James Bond meets Metal Gear Solid, but in Rockstar's signature open-world style. While full gameplay details were never shown publicly, the game was rumored to include multiple international locations like Morocco, Siberia, and Washington, D.C., a focus on stealth, infiltration, and silent takedowns, rather than guns a-blazing combat. Cold War themes involving the CIA, KGB, double agents, and betrayal, as well as disguises, wiretaps, all that sort of spy stuff, were said to be in the game, as well as a more mature overall tone. Agent was announced in 2009 as a PS3 exclusive, part of a deal between Rocksteady and Sony. However, development changes reportedly plagued the project from the start. Rockstar North was also working on GTA 4, its DLCs, and then GTA 5, which likely absorbed most resources, and internal reports suggested the game lacked a clear creative direction. The last official sign of life came in 2011 when Rockstar renewed the trademark, but by 2018, 2Take, Rockstar's parent company, abandoned the trademark, signaling the game's quiet death. Even though Sony and Rocksteady have seen massive success from GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2, Agent still remains as a major what if in their history. Although with the money they're seeing, I doubt they really even think about this game. Star Wars 1313. Star Wars 1313 was a third-person action-adventure game set in the criminal underworld of Coruscant, specifically in level 1313, which is a rough, lawless, neon-lit district far beneath the city's surface. This was Star Wars like we had never seen it before. No Jedi, no Force powers, just gritty blaster combat, gadgets, and street-level survival. Originally, you would play as an unnamed bounty hunter navigating the corrupt heart of the galaxy, but later development realized that you were going to play as a young Boba Fett, rising through the ranks of the criminal underworld. The game was meant to blend Uncharted-style cinematic action with a darker, more mature tone. The demo was shown at E3 2012, and it blew players away, showing clean visuals and smooth transitions between gameplay and cutscenes, pushing what the PS3 was capable of at the time. Even George Lucas himself was directly involved in shaping the story and characters. In 2012, Disney bought Lucasfilms and all its assets, including LucasArts. This was Star Wars 1313's downfall. In April 2013, Disney shut down internal game development at LucasArts and canceled most projects, including 1313. Disney instead licensed out Star Wars games to EA, leading to titles like Battlefront, Jedi Fallen Order, and Squadrons. But 1313 never resurfaced. While 1313 never came out, its influence has been seen in many Star Wars games, including the ones I listed before. Horror of the Orient. Horror of the Orient was a game developed by the core team behind LA Noire under a new label called KMM Interactive Entertainment. The game was described as a narrative-driven open-world action game in the same cinematic detective-style vein as LA Noire, but instead of 1940s Los Angeles, this game would teleport players to 1936 Shanghai, a city described as a corrupt and violent melting pot of East and West, run by crime syndicates, foreign powers, and revolutionaries. The title refers to a nickname given to Shanghai in the early 20th century, often used by Westerners to describe its chaos and lawlessness. You could play as a Western detective or agent working for the International Police Force, tasked with maintaining order amid growing political unrest and violent gang activity. The first sign of trouble was when the game was announced, specifically the name. Chinese Australian community leaders, which is important because game development was based in Australia, publicly condemned the name as offensive and derogatory towards Chinese people and culture. Brendan McNamara, who was the lead developer of KMM, defended the title by saying it reflected a real nickname from the era, used to criticize the West's exploitation of Shanghai, but the controversy hindered funding and PR support for the game. Due to that, the studio fell apart. Staff reportedly left due to creative differences and production difficulties, and by 2013, the studio was quietly shuttered, and the game was officially dead. If only they just called it Shanghai Noir or something, then maybe it would have come out. BioShock Vita. At Sony's E3 2011 press conference, BioShock creator Ken Levine appeared on stage to announce a brand new entry in the franchise, exclusively for the PlayStation Vita. This wasn't just a port or a side story, it was billed as an original BioShock game, tailored specifically for the handheld. It was a huge moment for Sony, signaling third-party commitment to the Vita and offering BioShock fans something unique. But aside from that announcement, there wasn't much after that. Ken Levine was vague about the exact plot, but in later interviews, he revealed some of the ambitious early ideas. Unlike previous BioShock games set in the Rapture or Columbia, BioShock Vita was pitched as a Final Fantasy tactics-style game set in the BioShock universe. This would have been a turn-based strategy RPG, focused more on tactical gameplay and decision-making than first-person shooting, a drastic departure from the core series. Some possibilities that were tossed around included a prequel to the original BioShock, potential exploration of the fall of Rapture, and entirely new characters, unconnected to Booker, Jack, or Elizabeth. Unfortunately, BioShock Vita was dead on arrival. 2Take Interactive, who owned the BioShock IP, and Sony, who owned the Vita, couldn't come to terms on a development deal. Sony reportedly wanted 2Take to fund the project. 2Take understandably wanted Sony to pay, since it would be exclusive to the Vita. As neither side budged, the game remained in limbo. Also, around this time, Irrational Games, under Levine, was going through its own internal transition. After releasing BioShock Infinite in 2013, the studio drastically downsized in 2014, with Levine saying he wanted to pursue smaller narrative-driven projects. The staff cuts and restructuring at Irrational sealed the fate of any unstarted projects, including the Vita game. These two reasons were pivotal in the cancellation of BioShock Vita, and it will remain a lost footnote in the vast history of BioShock. Jak and Daxter 4. After releasing Jak 3 in 2004, Naughty Dog had taken the franchise from light-hearted platformer to a much darker, more narrative-driven action-adventure series. The trilogy ended with what felt like a definitive conclusion, but Naughty Dog wasn't done, well, at least not at first. They began early development on a true next-gen sequel for the PS3. This would be Jak 4, and it was going to take the franchise in an even more mature, darker, and realistic direction. Anyways, the game was meant to reimagine the world of Jak, making it grittier and more grounded, possibly leaning towards a post-apocalyptic or tribal tone. Concept art showed lush jungles, ruined temples, dense forests, and more earthy, realistic character designs. Jak himself looked older, more stoic, less cartoonish, and more human-like. While specific gameplay systems weren't confirmed, fans believe it would have kept the open world traversal, vehicle combat, and morphing eco-powers, but refined for more complex hardware. Even with all these plans for the future, Naughty Dog still had concerns. Naughty Dog struggled with balancing their desire to mature the franchise with what fans loved about it in the first place. Later, co-presidents Evan Wells and Christoph Balestra admitted that every version they sketched out didn't feel like Jak and Daxter anymore. During this identity crisis, the team came up with a new idea, a narrative-driven post-pandemic survival game with grounded characters and emotional weight, and that game became The Last of Us. Once they realized Jak 4 wasn't clicking, they shelved it entirely to pursue The Last of Us, which would go on to become one of the most acclaimed PlayStation titles ever. Though many Jak fans were upset by the cancellation, there is no doubt in anybody's mind that Naughty Dog made the right decision by sticking with The Last of Us. Batman: The Dark Knight. Batman: The Dark Knight was a planned open-world action stealth game developed by Pandemic Studios and established by Electronic Arts. Development began in September 2006, well before the filming of the Christopher Nolan movie had even wrapped, with the intent to launch the game alongside or shortly after the film's theatrical release in 2008. It was meant to serve as a tie-in to The Dark Knight, and initially followed a more linear, stealth-based structure similar to the 2005 Batman Begins game. As development progressed, the team at Pandemic decided to pivot from a linear experience to an open-world format, allowing players to freely explore Gotham City using the Batmobile, Batpod, or by gliding and grappling through the air. The new direction promised side missions, emergent gameplay, and traversal mechanics that would bring Batman's world to life like never before. However, this change caused major complications. To support the open world vision, Pandemic adopted its in-house Odin engine, originally designed for another project, Saboteur, but the engine wasn't ready for streaming large city environments or handling high levels of interactivity. This led to widespread instability, crashing, and poor performances. At one point, adding Batman's player model alone would cause the frame rate to plummet to 5 FPS. Sounds like my PC, god. Technical hurdles continued to mount as well. The game's lighting system was so clunky that any modification required manual reprogramming. Worse, developers didn't even have proper level design tools for nearly 7 months. Studio management constantly shifted directions, often reversing earlier creative decisions. By early 2008, Electronic Arts added more developers to try to salvage the game in time for the film's home video release, pushing the new target to December of that year. But by September, the game remained unplayable. It was canceled in October 2008, and the Brisbane branch of Pandemic Studios was shut down shortly after. EA reportedly lost up to $100 million in potential revenue and sunk development costs. Pandemic as a whole was shuttered the following year. Despite being canceled, traces of the game survive. Concept art, design documents, and some gameplay footage has been leaked online. Most importantly, the failure of the Dark Knight tie-in arguably opened the door for Rocksteady to pitch and develop Batman Arkham Asylum, which went on to redefine superhero games entirely. Heavenly Sword 2. Heavenly Sword was released in 2007 by Ninja Theory and published as a PS3 exclusive by Sony Computer Entertainment. It was praised for its cinematic visuals, expressive motion capture, and engaging combat featuring the heroic Nariko, but ultimately its sales were underwhelming and failed to recoup developmental costs. Plans for a sequel were floating around even before the release, with co-founder, I'm sure it's not that hard but I'm not going to try, confirming that the team had a full story outline for Heavenly Sword 2, and the studio viewed the title as the start of a planned trilogy. However, Ninja Theory chose not to pursue development of the follow-up, opting instead to develop a new multi-platform title, Enslaved: Odyssey to the West, largely because remaining tied to Sony's IP terms would have locked them into a single large project and threatened their financial stability. Sony shifted early development of Heavenly Sword 2 to their internal SCE Cambridge studio in 2008. According to industry reports and ex-Sony employee CVs, the project entered early production but was ultimately canceled that same year. Sony decided it was no longer commercially viable. Pirates of the Caribbean: Armada of the Damned. Armada of the Damned was an ambitious open-world action RPG developed by Propaganda Games and published under Disney Interactive. Announced at E3 2009, it was intended for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Windows platforms, and planned for a release in early 2011. The game's setting was conceived as a prequel narrative, taking place a decade or more before the Curse of the Black Pearl movie. Players would control James Sterling, a pirate captain who was killed and resurrected under supernatural circumstances. The design emphasized player agency, allowing players to become either a legendary or dreaded pirate. That choice would influence Sterling's demeanor and appearance, how NPCs reacted to him, his ship's look and his crew, and of course branching storylines. The game was canceled in October 2010 due to Disney's reorganization of its gaming division, shortly before the developer, Propaganda Studios, was closed. Pokemon Z. In past Pokemon generations, it became standard to see a third version released after the original pair, like Emerald, Platinum, Ultra Sun, or Ultra Moon. Pokemon X and Y released in 2013, and it diverged from this pattern. They never received a Pokemon Z follow-up. Internal documents leaked by Centro Leaks confirmed that Game Freak did indeed plan a third version centered around Zygarde, seemingly intended as the star of Pokemon Z. According to those documents, Zygarde would of course been featured on the box art, and its storyline would have focused on restoring balance in Kalos when Xerneas, or Yveltal, became too powerful. This would involve Zygarde adopting unique combat forms customized to counter each legendary, forming a wolf-like shape to oppose Xerneas, and a weapons-based anti-air form to challenge Yveltal. These forms are strongly suspected to have been the seeds for what later became Zygarde's 10% form and complete form, introduced in Pokemon Sun and Moon years later. The narrative threads intended for Pokemon Z appeared to have been folded into Generation 7, though with less prominence than originally planned. Originally, Nintendo and Game Freak never announced or acknowledged Pokemon Z. Fans only discovered indications of its existence through leaks. According to discussions on Reddit and coverage by leak archivists, Game Freak reportedly abandoned the idea to focus on new content for Pokemon's 20th anniversary, ultimately opting for Pokemon Sun and Moon instead. One interpretation is that development momentum shifted entirely after Black and White 2 and X and Y, and the market trajectory signaled a greater opportunity with a fresh region rather than a third version of an older pair. Pokemon Z stands as a fascinating lost chapter of Generation 6, an approach that could have expanded the Kalos mythology significantly, though the project never saw the light of day. The early designs and storyline concepts had real depth, particularly in how Zygarde was positioned as a balancing force. Modern titles like Pokemon Legends Z through A seem to carry forward some of that spirit, perhaps realizing in a different form what Z could have been. Daredevil, the Man Without Fear. Daredevil, the Man Without Fear was a third-person beat-em-up action game in development around 2003 to 2004 by 5000 Feet Studios and set to be published by Encore Incorporated for PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC. The project expanded significantly when news of the 2003 Daredevil film emerged. The scope shifted from a low-budget vignette game to an ambitious open-world Hell's Kitchen experience. Initially structured as a vignette-style levels showcasing iconic Daredevil moments, later transformed into an open-world city sandbox with smaller crime incident side missions. Notable mechanics were Shadow World mode, a stylized echolocation view to sense enemies and heat sources, akin to detective mode in the Batman Arkham games. Traversal via grinding and inspired by Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and Billy Club swinging mechanics for urban navigation and combat similar to early Spider-Man games. The narrative was an entirely original storyline, loosely inspired by the comic Elektra Lives Again. Mid-development, 5000 Feet expanded from 12 to 50 staff members to support the larger vision. They opted to build a different engine based on renderware tech to avoid licensing costs, which caused technical challenges. Marvel and Sony were also breathing down the necks of the developers to fit their vision for the game, while 5000 Feet had other ideas. The release date for the game was pushed back multiple times before it was ultimately canceled. Gotham by Gaslight. Developed by Day One Studios around 2009 to 2010, this project was a pitch to THQ for a game adaptation of the 1989 Elseworlds comic Batman Gotham by Gaslight. Rather than a traditional modern Gotham, it cast Batman in a Victorian-era Gotham City, facing off against Jack the Ripper amid fog-lidden streets, gaslit rooftops, and unique steampunk thriller vibes. A prototype demo was created showcasing atmospheric foggy streets, cape physics, and UI elements hinting at features like slow motion and retro-futuristic gadgets. Despite the compelling concept and positive internal reception, the project was ultimately cancelled through THQ because THQ was unable to secure the Batman license from Warner Brothers. The game never went beyond the pitch stage, but the short demo and concept art were later leaked online. Widespread fan interest. Developers expressed disappointment, describing the cancellation as a major letdown. Though only a glimpse of it exists, Gotham by Gaslight is still remembered as a missed opportunity to explore a darker, more stylistic take on the Batman mythos, one that could have stood apart from the modern Arkham series and offered something truly unique in the superhero gaming space. Sunman. Sunman was developed by EIM and intended for release by Sunsoft on the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1992. The project was originally conceived as a Superman game, but due to the licensing with DC Comics, Sunsoft rebranded the lead character as Sunman, altering visuals just enough to avoid copyright infringement. Gameplay reflects Sunsoft's earlier Batman titles on the NES, featuring run, jump, punch, and duck mechanics. Uniquely, this hero could fly by holding up, while entering side-scrolling flight stages. He could also fire laser and heat vision at enemies. While no formal plot documentation exists, the title screen's logo, cape-wearing sprite, flight animations, and cutscenes showing Clark Kent transforming into Sunman strongly echo the Superman mythos, suggesting this was a nearly complete adaptation before being stripped of the license. Sunsoft reportedly absorbed the costs and moved on rather than cancel mid-development entirely. With the NES nearing irrelevance, the game was quietly shelved. Interestingly enough, this game is not necessarily lost anymore. In 2003, a European collector sold a mysterious cartridge to the Lost Levels, which revealed the mostly complete Sunman prototype ROM. Further confirmation came from the cutting room floor, which documented hidden assets like an unused Superman copyright message and early builds with original Superman sprites and music. In 2014, a ROM hack restored Sunman into the original Superman format, with title screen, music, and visuals, making it playable as a faithful recreation, though still unlicensed. While there was no real release, this is one of the few lost games that we finally got to see fully thought out. Doom 4. Doom 4 was a fully fledged sequel in development at ID Software between around 2007 to 2013 and was built on the ID Tech 5 engine. The game's plot reportedly centered on a Hell on Earth invasion in 2038 beginning in New York and involving a resistance of surviving humans fighting UAC-filled demonic forces, like most Doom games. Unlike the typical Doom formula, Doom 4 included a slower, more tactical combat pace. Fans and even insiders nicknamed it Call of Doom due to its striking resemblance to modern military shooters like Call of Duty or Battlefield. By around 2011 to 2013, ID and Bethesda concluded Doom 4 didn't feel like Doom. Despite the high production values, the tone and gameplay lacked the speed, versatile combat, and singular focus of the franchise. The project was officially canceled in early 2013, after which the team restarted development from scratch, ultimately leading to the rebooted Doom 2016. All that is left of Doom 4 is leaked screenshots and footage, as well as some surviving concepts that were added to later Doom games like glory kills and weapon assets. Girl with a Stick. Insomniac Games, known for platformers like Cypro, sought to evolve beyond their established genre. They spent 6 months developing the game Girl with a Stick, a prototype conceived in the early 2000s as part of an effort to create more mature, non-platformer action-adventure games. Described by the company leadership as Tomb Raider meets Zelda, the game would have embraced primitive, low-tech worlds, intentionally avoiding futuristic tools and castles, aiming for a grounded fantasy feel. However, it became clear early that Girl with a Stick was not panning out the way the developers saw it. Insomniac couldn't identify the one thing the game would do better than any other, leaving it stuck in a middle ground that didn't excite players or staff. Also, Sony leadership reportedly felt the game lacked market viability and urged the studio to stick with what they did best: platformers and action titles with a proven fan base. Ultimately, the project was shelved, and the team pivoted towards what became the Ratchet & Clank franchise, a new identity born from lessons learned on this failed experiment. Prey 2. Prey 2 was the planned sequel to the 2006 Prey, a sci-fi first-person shooter developed by Human Head Studios and published by 2K. While the original game followed a Native American protagonist aboard an alien ship, Prey 2 was a bold reinvention of the franchise, taking the series in a dramatically different direction. A cyberpunk bounty hunter shooter set on an alien world. Work on Prey 2 began shortly after the release of the first game. Human Head Studios, the original developer, wanted to create a more open-ended experience. Instead of following Prey's protagonist Tommy, the sequel would introduce a new lead, Killian Samuels, a US Marshal who ends up stranded on an alien planet. The game shifted from the linear structure of Prey to a more open, free-roaming design, drawing inspiration from games like Blade Runner. Players would take on bounty hunting missions across a vibrant alien metropolis known as Exodus. Prey 2 was officially announced by Bethesda in 2011. It received strong attention after a cinematic CGI trailer showed Killian stylishly pursuing an alien fugitive across the cityscape. After 2011, updates on the game grew increasingly sparse. By 2012, rumors of trouble in development began to surface. Human Head Studios was reportedly locked out of development, even though they completed substantial work. Reports emerged of creative differences between Human Head and Bethesda over direction, deadlines, and contracts. Human Head may have stopped working on the game around late 2011, and Bethesda allegedly tried to hand the project off to Arcane Studios without crediting the original team, along with many more issues. In 2014, Bethesda finally announced that Prey 2 was cancelled, stating it wasn't up to our quality standards, despite positive press from earlier previews. Later in 2017, Bethesda released a completely reimagined game called Prey, although this game had no connection to the original Prey or Prey 2. Dirty Harry. Around 2004 to 2005, Warner Bros. Interactive began inviting pitches for a modern-day Dirty Harry game. The license holders invited developers to propose new gameplay visions for the iconic Clint Eastwood character. By late 2004, the Collective Incorporated secured the project, leading development for the next-generation consoles. The game was envisioned as a third-person shooter, evolving from earlier mission-based pitches to cover-based shooting with a reputation system, like in GTA games. Set between the first Dirty Harry and Magnum Force, the narrative was to explore deeper dimensions of Harry Callahan's early years on the job in San Francisco. The game targeted a 2007 release. By mid-2006, an E3 trailer gave audiences a glimpse of the look and tone, though gameplay mechanics remained unknown. Around 2007, Warner Bros. Removed the Collective from development. Timegate Studios attempted to revive it with overhauled production, including co-op gameplay, but ultimately, Warner Bros. Felt the game wasn't very good and pulled the plug altogether. The game was reportedly 70% complete when it was canceled. However, no playable prototype or screenshots have ever been made public. Fallout Van Buren. Van Buren was the codename for what would have been Fallout 3, developed by Black Isle Studios, the original creators of the Fallout series. It was envisioned as a direct continuation of Fallout 1 and 2, retaining their isometric, turn-based RPG style and deep, moral complex narrative structure. Development began in 2000 under Interplay Entertainment. Van Buren was set in the American Southwest, particularly Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and Nevada, and took place in 2253, decades after the events of Fallout 2. It was designed to be a much larger, more ambitious game with multiple factions, branching quests, and world-changing decisions. You played as a prisoner who escapes confinement at the beginning of the game. As the story unfolded, you'd be caught between warring factions in a morally gray world shaped by nuclear fallout, ancient technology, ideological conflict. The central antagonist was Presper, a rogue enclave scientist based on the Remnant's secret orbital weapons platform called the Ballistic Orbital Missile Base, or BOMB. There were also 6 different factions you could come across. Despite promising design documents and some playable builds, Van Buren was canceled in late 2003 due to Interplay's financial collapse, leading to massive layoffs at Black Isle Studios, as well as the fact that they lost the license altogether. The cancellation marked the end of Black Isle and the original Fallout team. However, their creative DNA persisted, particularly through Obsidian Entertainment, which was founded by many ex-Black Isle devs. Luckily, tech demo of Van Buren was leaked online, and some plot and character aspects inspired Fallout New Vegas, so at least we got to see a glimpse of what could have been. Batman Project Sabbath. This WB Games Montreal title was initially slated to be the next Arkhamverse chapter after Arkham Knight, set approximately 10 years later with a Batman Beyond-inspired near-future Gotham. Rather than Bruce Wayne, players would suit up as Damian Wayne, now the new Batman, while an elderly Bruce serves as his mentor. The mechanics were similar to Arkham Knight, with the Bat Cycle replacing the Batmobile. While no story was talked about, villains like Two-Face as the Judge, Gorilla Grodd, a resurrected Poison Ivy, Flamingo, Huntress, White Rabbit, and Killer Croc would all be in the game due to concept art leaks. Even with all that, this game was pretty dead on arrival. Around 2017, the team pivoted away from Arkham-style single-player towards live service titles, shelving Project Sabbath in favor of Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which ultimately disappointed fans. Star Wars Force Unleashed 3. Officially envisioned as the final chapter in the Force Unleashed trilogy, development discussions began following the cliffhanger ending of The Force Unleashed 2 in 2010, with both series writer Hayden Blackman and actor Sam Witwer developing the story for the next-gen consoles. Early plans called for a more open-world, physics sandbox-style game, departing from the level-based design of the earlier titles. Starkiller and Darth Vader were intended to team up to fight a new threat orchestrated by Emperor Palpatine, with optional co-op play, allowing one player as Vader and one as Starkiller. Unfortunately, that's pretty much all she wrote for this game. Plans were effectively canceled before development picked up, in part due to internal turmoil at LucasArts, massive layoffs, and Hayden Blackman's departure in 2010. And when Disney acquired Lucasfilms in April 2013, that was the nail in the coffin for this one. Rainbow Six Patriots. Announced in 2011 on the cover of Game Informer, the game was being developed by Ubisoft Montreal with support from Ubisoft Toronto and Red Storm Entertainment. The narrative centered on Team Rainbow being deployed in New York City to stop a domestic militia known as the True Patriots, who took violent action against Wall Street corruption victims. The True Patriots were led by Treadway, a former military figure turned ideological leader. He believed the government had failed its citizens and waged guerrilla warfare in response. Players would control Echo Leader, driven by Commanding Officer James Wolfe, a morally ambitious Navy SEAL who prioritized results over ethics. Patriots aimed to integrate advanced tactical options, including new repelling mechanics, a revamped planning interface dubbed Observe, Plan, and Act, and highly realistic enemy AI where foes could trip, react dynamically, and survive longer under fire. However, the development period featured significant leadership turnover, with creative, narrative, and design directors leaving or being removed as early as 2012. By mid-2013, Ubisoft officially shifted Patriots' development to next-gen consoles. Technical limitations of the old generation hardware made the ambitious destruction in AI systems non-feasible, prompting the decision to scrap the project and start anew. Ubisoft CEO, noted the strategic shift focused on creating a robust multiplayer-first game and postponing any cinematic story campaign efforts. In June 2014, Ubisoft officially ceased Patriots' development and inaugurated a clean slate. This cancellation led to the creation of the infamous Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, which is still one of the most popular games to this day. Marvel Chaos. Announced at San Diego Comic-Con 2007, Marvel Chaos was a next-gen fighting game in development at E3 Chicago, intended for Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. It served as a follow-up to Marvel Nemesis, Rise of the Imperfects. Unlike traditional 2D fighters, it was envisioned as a 3D arena brawler with full environmental destruction and Marvel's iconic characters clashing in epic, interactive cityscapes. Characters like Hulk, Captain America, Spider-Man, Doctor Doom, Thor, Phoenix, and Juggernaut were reportedly playable. Environments included civilian-filled city blocks and train stations, enhancing immersion and strategic impact. EA Chicago failed to meet profitable benchmarks, which of course led to tons of issues. In November 2007, EA shuttered the studio, and by January 2008, the partnership between EA and Marvel officially ended. With the studio dissolved, the project was terminated immediately. LMNO. LMNO was a secretive collaboration between Electronic Arts and Steven Spielberg, aimed at reinventing the emotional depth of storytelling in video games. Rather than a standard action title, LMNO focused on a deeply human, emotionally driven relationship between the player and an alien woman named Eve. Set in a near-future America, players would control a fugitive who encounters Eve, a strange, non-verbal alien with human-like features. You were tasked with helping her escape government forces while uncovering a layered conspiracy involving secret agencies, human experimentation, and moral ambiguity. The relationship between the protagonist and Eve was meant to evolve naturally over the course of the game, depending on how you treated her. Spielberg's creative vision was central to the game's development. He wanted the game to emphasize empathy, emotional storytelling, and cinematic experiences without relying on traditional gunplay. This meant gameplay would revolve around exploration, environmental interaction, puzzle solving, stealth, and physical communication rather than combat. Spielberg envisioned a game more akin to a sci-fi drama than a shooter, drawing comparisons to Half-Life 2, where the bond between characters shapes the experience. Despite the massive potential, LMNO was cancelled after several years in pre-production. There were a few key reasons for this. The systems, like the emotional AI, gesture-based interaction, and stealth mechanics, didn't come together cohesively, as well as the fact that EA was in the midst of company-wide changes, with a new focus on blockbuster franchises and online features. A slower-paced, emotional, experimental single-player game didn't fit the evolving strategy. By around 2009, LMNO was officially shelved. A smaller, more action-oriented rework of the game was reportedly attempted, codenamed The Escape Artist, but that too was eventually cancelled. The City of Metronome. First revealed at E3 2005, The City of Metronome by Tarsier Studios stood out immediately thanks to its bizarre, immersive world and fresh gameplay ideas. The game was set in a dystopian industrial city where everything, from machines to people, ran on rhythm and sound. Players would take control of a young boy working for a train company who begins to uncover strange truths about the city and its oppressive corporate overlords. The central mechanic revolved around recording and manipulating sounds from the environment to solve puzzles, sabotage devices, and influence people. Farseer described it as a blend between adventure game puzzle solving and stealth action with a heavy emphasis on environmental interaction, leading to its cancellation shortly after the E3 showcase. Dark Side. Originally codenamed Darkside or Internal 7, the game was conceived as an open-world, post-apocalyptic action RPG blending melee combat and firearms, set in a futuristic Earth where one hemisphere is permanently illuminated and the other one is frozen, or in a perpetual twilight zone. Concept art that leaked later, credited to former concept artist Eric San Juan, showed skeletal monsters, drone enemy designs, Kraken-like creatures, and scanning mechanics. Sadly, the game reportedly failed due to the mixing of genres feeling awkward and clunky instead of seamless. The game was effectively killed off during Sony's Santa Monica's restructuring in 2014. Not much other than some concept art came from this game in the end. G-Police 3. G-Police 3 was a canceled sequel to the old-school sci-fi shooter series G-Police, which first came out on the original PlayStation in 1997. The games were set in a gritty future where you flew high-tech gunships for a police force trying to keep peace on a moon of Jupiter. The first two games had a cool setting and immersive missions, but they were also a bit clunky to control and didn't sell very well. Still, they built up a small but loyal fan base. At some point, fans hoped a third game might eventually get made, especially during the PS2 or PS3 era, with better controls, bigger worlds, and a deeper story, but nothing ever came of it. The studio behind the series, Psygnosis, stopped making these kinds of niche sci-fi games. Although there was a trademark filed by Sony in 2016 that got fans excited, G-Police 3 never officially existed and likely didn't get far in development, if it ever even started at all. Dark Guns. Dark Guns was a canceled shooter game in development for the original PlayStation during the late 1990s. It was led by David Jaffe, known later for God of War. Sony gave him a generous budget and creative freedom to develop whatever he wanted. Initially, the game was planned as a traditional run-and-gun shooter, but over time, the concept shifted dramatically. Players would pilot a UFO, destroy real cities, and abduct people, creating a unique but unusual gameplay idea. The game's vision kept changing and became somewhat confusing. It was unclear whether the game aimed to be serious or more fun, arcade-style experience. Despite spending around 4 years working on the project and creating a playable prototype, the team struggled to bring the game together successfully. Jaffe later admitted he lacked the experience to manage such a complex project, which led to organizational challenges. After roughly 4 years, Sony canceled Dark Guns. The cancellation was due to the project being over-ambitious with too many conflicting ideas and unclear direction. Silent Hill Broken Covenant. Silent Hill Broken Covenant was a canceled installment in the Silent Hill horror series that was reportedly in development in the mid-2000s. The game was rumored to be in development by Climax Studios, a UK-based developer known for working on various Silent Hill titles and spin-offs. Broken Covenant was envisioned as a console-exclusive project for the PS3, aiming to revitalize the series for the then new hardware capabilities. Broken Covenant would have focused on Elisa Gillespie's influence spreading outside of the town of Silent Hill, with the protagonist, Father Hector Santos, traveling from El Paso, Texas to Arizona to help his niece Anna. The Arizona town would begin to change and shift as it slowly becomes corrupted by Elisa's past memories, and Silent Hill locations from different time periods materialized across the American Southwest. This game setting was to emphasize a deteriorating religious cult or faction, hence the title. The game was shelved due to a combination of Konami changing priorities and development difficulties. Black Panther. The canceled Black Panther game was an exciting project being worked on by Cliffhanger Games. It was made with the help from Marvel Games and published by EA. The game was planned to be a single-player, story-focused adventure set in the high-tech African nation of Wakanda. Players would control characters like T'Challa, Shuri, Killmonger, and M'Baku as they tried to prove themselves worthy of becoming the next Black Panther. The game's story would have included the Skrulls, which are shape-shifting aliens from the Marvel Comics. These enemies could disguise themselves as trusted allies and would change their behavior based on how the player played the game. Wakanda itself is going to be a big, detailed, open-world location that mixed futuristic buildings with traditional African culture. Each playable character would have had different powers, gadgets, and fighting styles. Players could choose different paths, and the story would change depending on who they chose to become the next Black Panther. Sadly, the game was canceled in May 2025, and EA also shut down Cliffhanger Games at the same time. The cancellation was part of EA's decision to cut back on riskier projects and focus on bigger, more successful series like The Sims, Apex Legends, Skate, and Battlefield. While EA is still working on a new Iron Man game, the Black Panther title was considered too slow to develop. Twisted Metal Apocalypse. This particular game was in development around 2007. It was planned as a grittier, more story-driven reboot that would introduce open-world elements, destructible environments, and a heavier narrative focus, unlike previous Twisted Metal entries. Apocalypse was reportedly going to take place, obviously based on the title, in a post-apocalyptic world, where society had fallen apart and the Twisted Metal tournament became something of a brutal survival game. The game was in development at Incognito Entertainment, the team led by Twisted Metal co-creator David Jaffe. There's evidence that the game had reached the prototype stage, with early builds and concept art showcasing new vehicle designs, urban wastelands, and more detailed character models. Some gameplay footage was reportedly shown internally at Sony, but it never became public. The game didn't get much further into development after 2008, but eventually, Apocalypse was turned into 2012's Twisted Metal. Dark Ring. So I couldn't find anything about a canceled game called Dark Ring, so this is most likely referring to the fact that the cult classic Dark Souls games were speculated to originally be called Dark Ring, but other than that I can't find anything. Sadness. Sadness was a gothic survival horror game under development by Polish studio Nibris, exclusively for, oddly enough, the Wii. First teased in 2006, before the console even had its official name, it captured attention with its bold promise of black and white visuals, psychological scares, and full Wiimote-driven gameplay with no traditional HUD or menus. Set in pre-World War I Eastern Europe, the game follows Maria, a Polish-Hungarian aristocrat, and her son Alexander, who becomes blind and mentally unstable following a train derailment. Alexander develops conditions like narcolepsy, schizophrenia, and other things as well. Maria must navigate a nightmare-inflicted countryside inspired by Slavic mythology, facing creatures such as werewolves and the single-eyed entity Lyko. Nibris, with assistance from Frontline Studios, began production targeting a 2008 or 2009 release. However, artistic disagreements ended their partnership in 2007, leaving the project directionless. By February 2010, with no playable demo or publisher secured, Nibris folded and Sadness was officially cancelled. Later, interestingly enough, the composer for the game later released a few preliminary music tracks, which remained the only substantial remnants of the game's production. Wet 2. Wet was a third-person action game developed by Behavior Interactive and published by Bethesda in 2009 for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. You played as Ruby Malone, a martial arts assassin wielding dual pistols and a sword, delivering stylish acrobatic combat and a grindhouse vibe. In late 2010, Behavior's CEO announced that Wet 2 was in development alongside Naughty Bear 2, which is another one of their games. It was officially listed on their company roadmap and officially confirmed by multiple outlets. By early 2011, the team reportedly had concept art, design documents, and a rudimentary prototype featuring elements such as slow motion effects and hair and wind simulation. Around March 2011, multiple tech artists and developers working on Wet 2 left Behavior to join other studios. Despite some early momentum, the project was abandoned after this. Resistance 4. Resistance 4 was a sequel concept initially pitched by Insomniac Games, creators of the original Resistance trilogy, but it never entered development beyond the pitch stage. The studio conceived the idea as a continuation of the Crimea storyline they had established in earlier games. According to Ted Prince, Insomniac's CEO, the pitch was a wonderful concept, fueled by team passion, but ultimately rejected by Sony for reasons related to market timing and existing competition, which, bro, these dudes Sony, man, they don't let anything go through, I swear. Justice League Mortal. The Justice League Mortal game was in development around 2008 as a tie-in to George Miller's canceled live-action Justice League Mortal film. The project was undertaken by Double Helix Games and continued even after the film was shelved, at one point pivoting into a broader Justice League title rather than a direct movie adaptation. Early production reportedly included concept art, design work, and at least partial build development. Former Double Helix level artist Jonathan Gwynn posted concept visuals online featuring characters like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and a bunch more, alongside environments such as the Flash Museum and Wayne Enterprises headquarters. Ultimately, the game was deeply tied to the fate of the Miller-led film, which was derailed by factors including Warner Brothers' shifting production choices, the 2008 Writers Guild strike, and budget revisions. Once the film was canceled, the game lost its primary anchor. Despite attempts to reposition it as a standalone title, WB decided to fold the assets into Green Lantern, Rise of the Manhunters, a more viable property at the time. Alright guys, so that was the Canceled Video Games Iceberg, and this was the longest video I've made on my channel so far, and if you made it all the way through, I really appreciate it, and make sure to subscribe and like if you enjoyed the video. Also, leave a comment down below about any games that you found interesting or any games that I should cover next or more in depth. And yeah, peace!